In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King and Israel's Prime Minister discussed the course of US-backed Palestinian-Israeli peace talks now underway. Destruction of the most dangerous agents in Syria's chemical arsenal is likely to be delayed amid new diplomacy to end the Syrian conflict. And 4 people are dead in a bomb blast in Lebanon that coincides with a trial of suspects in the murder of former Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri. Good evening and welcome to the news. His Majesty the King and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu discussed the latest in US-brokered Palestinian-Israeli peace talks. During the meeting in Amman, His Majesty urged the parties to seize the opportunity at hand, made available by the intensive efforts of US Secretary of State John Kerry to make tangible progress in the peace negotiations. The ultimate goal, he said, is setting up an independent and viable Palestinian state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital and living in peace and harmony alongside Israel. His Majesty stressed that Jordan's higher interests, particularly those linked to final status issues, are on top of the kingdom's priorities. The King also said all parties should work for creating an atmosphere conducive to a successful outcome in the negotiating process. The Israeli Prime Minister briefed the King on the course of the peace talks and the US efforts in this respect. The King's meeting with Netanyahu followed recent talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Kerry as part of the ongoing consultation and coordination between the King and the parties to the peace process. The consultations come at a critical phase in which the Palestinian-Israeli negotiating framework is being worked out under US auspices. His Majesty the King received a letter from Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who congratulated the King over Jordan's election as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2 years. The letter was delivered to Royal Court Chief Faiz Tarauni by Japanese Senior Vice Minister of the Cabinet Office, Yasutsushi Nishimura. The letter highlighted the importance of Jordan as a Security Council member in boosting the kingdom's diplomacy to enhance world peace and security. The Japanese Prime Minister praised Jordan's efforts to enhance democracy as a model for the Middle East, as well as the kingdom's efforts to host Syrian refugees. Tarauni said Jordan was interested in forging closer ties with Japan, mainly in the economic, trade and investment fields. Interior Minister Hussein al-Majali met King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa of Bahrain. The minister is in Manama to attend the opening of the Bahrain 2014 International Air Show. Majali conveyed to the Bahraini monarch the good wishes of His Majesty King Abdullah. King Hamad praised the solid and historical Jordanian-Bahraini ties, which had witnessed a boost at all levels, particularly security cooperation. The Law House blocs, Watan, the Islamic centrist party, and the Jordan National Union Party have joined together in one coalition, grouping 50 lawmakers. House Speaker Atif al-Tarauni congratulated the blocs for forming the first parliamentary coalition, calling the move a great achievement. He said the legislature will, through that serious move, seek to upgrade its true constitutional role of legislation and oversight. Tarauni said the 3 blocs were brought together by common denominators that constituted the groundwork of a clear and well-defined working program. The House Speaker urged the government to stick to its constitutional role to cooperate with the new coalition to prop up the aspired reform and change. The coalition's coordinator, Khalid Bakkar, said the current stage requires a shift from individual work to collective action. The United Nations delivered aid to a district in southeast Damascus. The UN said earlier that Syrian authorities had promised to allow humanitarian supplies through to areas cut off by fighting. Meantime, 5 commanding officers from a Russian heavy missile cruiser went on a Chinese frigate off Syria's west coast. They conducted tactical consultations with Chinese officers on providing security for the Norwegian and Danish special vessels transporting components of Syria's chemical weapons to the destruction site. We get more in this report.
The head of the world's chemical weapons watchdog said the removal and destruction of the most dangerous agents in Syria's chemical arsenal will likely be delayed until the end of June. He cited logistical and security problems for the delay. Mustard gas and the components for making sarin and VX, known as priority agents, were originally to have been destroyed by the end of March. Ahmed Uzumju, head of the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, was addressing Italy's parliament about the transfer of the primary agents. He said he was confident that all the chemicals could be destroyed by the end of June, the original deadline of the complete elimination of Syria's chemical weapons program and associated agents.
L'operazione che si andrà a realizzare.
The operation will consist of a ship-to-ship transfer of about 60 containers. They will be transported immediately onto the American ship without touching port side.
A Chinese frigate conducted tactical coordination with a Russian naval vessel for follow-up escorting missions to ship out Syria's chemical weapons for destruction. The two sides reached consensus in terms of the next phase of joint escorting missions and relevant joint exercises. The Syrian crisis figured high on talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif. Zarif, who also met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, noted that Iran witnessed Russia's success in helping the handover of Syria's chemical weapons and stemming the three-year crisis. Syrian government officials are due to attend peace talks known as Geneva II in Switzerland next week. In the ongoing conflict in Syria, a helicopter plunged from the sky in Daria on the outskirts of the capital Damascus. Witnesses said there was gunfire when the crash occurred. Hibal Artoum for the news at 10.
In neighboring Lebanon, a suicide car bomb killed 4 people and wounded 26 others in a Hezbollah stronghold on Lebanon's northern border with Syria. It was the latest sign of the Syrian civil war spilling over to its neighbor. The car bomb went off near a local government building in the center of Hermil at the northern end of the Biqa' Valley, an area populated mainly by Shiite Muslims from whom Hezbollah draws its support. The explosion shattered windows and damaged nearby buildings. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, but it fit a pattern of attacks by rival sectarian groups on each other's strongholds that has been amplified by Syria's civil war. Former Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri said the trial in absentia of 4 men charged with the killing of his father, former Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri, is a chance for truth and justice. The trial began in The Hague, where the 4 are charged with planning the blast near Beirut's seafront, which killed Hariri and 21 other people. The 4 members of the Hezbollah group are still at large and are being tried in absentia. They face charges of murder, terrorism, and orchestrating the bomb attack on Hariri. Speaking on the first day of the trial at a United Nations court in The Hague, Saad Hariri said the trial would help promote justice and democracy in a country which has long been afflicted by political violence.
Today, for the first time, this act of terror that happened in Lebanon, hopefully we'll see the time of impunity ending and the time of justice coming. We are today beginning to see the unfolding of how Prime Minister Hariri and many others of the Syrian revolution have been killed and assassinated because of their fight for democracy.
The Iraqi army retook the town of Saqlawiyya, about 10 kilometers north of Fallujah, west of the capital, Baghdad. The recapture of the town followed heavy clashes with militants who had taken over government buildings and the town's police station. An army officer said the military operation to retake the area began early yesterday, adding that the Saqlawiyya police station was freed along with other buildings in the government complex. Helicopter gunships were used to force the militants out of the police station, but failed to evict the fighters. The militants withdrew towards Fallujah, making use of a corridor the army had left for civilians. Troops and tanks then retook the police station, turning it into an army base. A senior Israeli military official said Hamas movement is probably not responsible for a recent upsurge in rocket fire out of Gaza, where it rules. But the unnamed official said Hamas will be made to suffer if the rocket salvos continue. He said Hamas should intervene to stop the violence, which he blamed on smaller militant groups. Hamas accused Israel of ratcheting up tensions and said it bore full responsibility for the renewed escalation. After months of unusual quiet along the fence that separates southern Israel from the Gaza Strip, some 20 missile launches have been detected in the last month. 5 rockets were fired towards the Israeli city of Ashkelon last night. The Israeli military said the Iron Dome missile defense system knocked out all 5 missiles. Israel hit back with airstrike that targeted 2 Hamas camps, wounding 5 people. There was a mood of optimism on the streets of Cairo after the initial results of a referendum showed an overwhelming approval for a new constitution. The state news agency and a government official said about 90% of voters approved the constitution. It won wide support among Egyptians who backed the army overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi back in July. Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood, which is sure to dispute the outcome, had called for a boycott of the 2-day vote, seeing it as part of a coup against a leader freely elected 18 months ago. It had called for anti-government protests. An Interior Ministry official said turnout so far may have exceeded 55%, though state news agency MENA did not give a figure. The United States military flew Rwandan troops into the Central African Republic. It was the second such U.S. operation in support of the African Union's efforts to stem bloodshed in the Central African Republic. A U.S. official said the airlift operation could last just over a month and would involve 2 U.S. military C-17 aircraft. The airlift mission is very similar to the one the United States carried out, flying forces from Burundi into the Central African Republic late last year. Fighting, attacks on mosques and the looting of Muslim-owned shops have persisted in the capital, Bangui, since the resignation of President Michel Dutschaudia last Friday under intense international pressure. Parts of southeastern Australia sweltered in a heat wave, with the city of Melbourne peaking at 42 degrees Celsius and Adelaide reaching 45 degrees. The hot temperatures fueled a bushfire at Rockley, some 100 kilometers from Adelaide, injuring 1 person. Here's more.
Bushfires are spreading in Grampians National Park in the state of Victoria as a heat wave sweeps through southeast Australia. The blaze, sparked by lightning, covers more than 1,000 hectares and is threatening rural areas. Residents have been told to leave the area immediately. More than 200 firefighters are trying to kill the blaze, but the terrain is very difficult to access. Parts of the southeast are sweltering, with temperatures peaking at 42 degrees Celsius in Melbourne. Some had to be checked by paramedics. Even animals at Adelaide Zoo were given cold treats. The group Climate Council warns in a report that Australia has only begun to feel the impact of climate change.
This is part of a longer-term upwards trend, and we know the physics of why this is occurring. It's simply because we're stacking more heat in the lower atmosphere.
Experts say extreme weather would affect Australia's agricultural output.
And to the world of glamour and fashion. British model and actress Liz Hurley was spotted in the front row at the Mark Cain show at Berlin's Fashion Week. The 48-year-old looked relaxed, sporting a light sequin top as photographers snapped away at one of the rare globally known stars showing up at Berlin Fashion Week. The typical Mark Cain style combined everyday wearability with elegance and individuality. Since Mark Cain was founded in Italy in 1973, the company has maintained its Italian roots with German perfection. The fabrics, such as woven fabric and jerseys, as well as the yarns, come direct from Italy.
something wrong with this plot. The actors here have not got a clue.
Juan Martin Del Potro became the first major casualty in the Australian Open men's draw when he was beaten 4-6, 6-3, 5-7, 6-4, 7-5 by Spain's Roberto Bautista in the second round. Bautista went for his shots to win the latter count 7-2, 53 and took his place in the third round at a Grand Slam tournament for the first time with the exhausted world number 5 netted. Earlier, Andy Murray cruised past French qualifier Vesu Millot in 3 straight sets at the Rod Laver Arena to qualify for the third round of the tournament. Murray won 23 consecutive points in a blistering finish to seal the match with a big serve. He will next play Spain's Feliciano Lopez. And in the women's division, Victoria Azarenka marched into the third round with a 6-1, 6-4 win over Czech Barbora Shchirtsova to stay on course for a hat-trick of titles at Melbourne Park. Azarenka avoided the blistering heat that plagued second-round action and saw play suspended for 4 hours, but was made to sweat as Shchirtsova scrambled to chase down almost everything thrown at her. Azarenka next faces the winner of Serbia's Bojana Jovanovski and Ivan Mirsberger of Austria. Finally, chilly and partly cloudy tonight with southeasterly brisk winds. A sort of unstable weather conditions will affect the country tomorrow with 1 or 2 showers, especially in the country's east. Winds will be northerly brisk, blowing dust in the Badia Desert region. Warm conditions are forecast for much of the Jordan Valley and the port city of Aqaba, where highs will be slightly below the mid-20s. Winds in Aqaba will be northerly brisk and the sea slightly choppy. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Now our top stories once again. His Majesty the King and Israel's Prime Minister discussed the course of US-backed Palestinian-Israeli peace talks now underway. Destruction of the most dangerous agents in Syria's chemical arsenal is likely to be delayed amid new diplomacy to end the Syrian conflict. And 4 people are dead in a bomb blast in Lebanon that coincides with a trial of suspects in the murder of former Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri. And that's the end of tonight's news. My name is Ra'ad Liptoush. Thanks for watching and have a good night.